The massive research station Harmony floated silently in the void between star systems, its gleaming metal hull reflecting the light of distant suns. Inside the medical training wing, 12 different species from across the galaxy gathered for something that had never been attempted before, the first interspecies medical education program. Dr. James Mitchell adjusted his standard Earth medical uniform and looked around the orientation hall with genuine curiosity. The sight before him was like something out of a science fiction movie, except this was completely real. Towering crystalline beings that looked like living gemstones stood next to insect-like creatures with multiple arms and chitinous shells. Floating nearby were beings of pure energy that shifted and pulsed with different colors, their forms barely contained within specialized containment fields. "Welcome, students of the Galactic Educational Consortium," announced the station's artificial intelligence through speakers that somehow translated every word into each species' native language. "Today marks the beginning of a historic collaboration in medical sciences across our diverse civilizations." James nodded politely and tried not to stare too obviously at his classmates. He had studied the basic information about each species during his 6-month preparation period on Earth, but seeing them in person was entirely different. The crystalline beings were called Zelkari, and they seemed to communicate through harmonic vibrations that the translation system converted into spoken words. The insect-like species were known as Vixum, and they made constant clicking sounds with their mandibles even when not speaking. "I am called Crystal in your language," said one of the Zelkari students, their voice coming through the translator with an oddly musical quality. "My actual name cannot be pronounced by non-crystalline vocal systems." The being's facete surface caught the overhead lights and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. "And I am Buzz," clicked one of the Vixum, his forearms moving in what James guessed might be a greeting gesture. "Your species designation is human, correct? You appear to be constructed quite differently from the database images we studied." James smiled and extended his hand in the universal human greeting, then quickly lowered it when he realized none of the alien species had similar appendages for handshakes. "Yes, I'm human. I'm James, and I'm really excited to be here learning alongside all of you." A floating energy being drifted closer, pulsing with warm yellow light. "I am called Glow for simplicity. Your species fascinates us greatly. According to our preliminary studies, humans appear to be among the most vulnerable of known intelligent species." "Vulnerable?" James asked, genuinely puzzled by the comment. Crystal's harmonious voice carried what sounded like concern. "Your outer covering is extremely thin, with no natural armor plating or defensive capabilities. Your circulatory system is visible through your translucent skin, and you lack any obvious methods of self-repair or damage resistance." Buzz's mandibles clicked rapidly, which James was beginning to understand indicated excitement or nervousness. "Our medical databases suggest that even minor tissue damage could prove catastrophic for human physiology. How does your species survive on your homeworld with such apparent fragility?" James found himself chuckling at their misconceptions. "We're actually tougher than we look. Humans have been surviving and thriving on Earth for thousands of years, and our planet isn't exactly the safest place in the galaxy." "But your skin," Glow pulsed with concerned orange light, "it appears paper-thin compared to proper chitinous plating or crystalline structure. Any puncture or laceration would result in immediate loss of vital fluids." "You mean blood?" James asked. "Yeah, we bleed when we get cut, but that's pretty normal for us. Our bodies are designed to handle that kind of thing." The alien students exchanged what James could only assume were skeptical glances, though it was difficult to interpret facial expressions on beings without traditional faces. A Vixum student named Click approached with obvious curiosity. "During our preparation studies," Click said, her mandibles moving in precise patterns, "we learned that humans regularly engage in activities that would be considered suicidal by most civilized species. Physical combat sports, high-velocity transportation, and voluntary exposure to harmful environmental conditions." "You mean like football and driving cars?" James asked with amusement. "Those are just normal parts of human life. We enjoy challenges and a bit of excitement." Crystal resonated with a sound that might have been disbelief. "Your species intentionally subjects itself to trauma for entertainment purposes." "Well, when you put it that way, it sounds worse than it is," James admitted. "But humans have always been pretty resilient. We heal from injuries, adapt to problems, and keep moving forward. It's just part of who we are." The orientation continued with each species presenting their unique medical knowledge and capabilities. The Zelkari demonstrated their ability to regenerate damaged crystalline structures through harmonic resonance. The Vixen showed how their chitinous exoskeletons could seal minor cracks automatically. The Lumens explained their energy-based physiology that made them nearly immune to physical damage. When it came time for James to present human medical capabilities, he felt almost embarrassed by how basic their natural defenses seemed in comparison. Humans mostly rely on our immune systems, natural healing, and medical technology, he explained. We're pretty good at surviving injuries and recovering from illness, but we don't have any of the amazing natural abilities you've all shown. As the orientation session ended and students began dispersing to their assigned quarters, James overheard Crystal speaking to Buzz in worried harmonic tones. I fear we may witness the demise of the human student during our first practical exercise. Their species appears catastrophically unsuited for medical training environments. James just smiled to himself as he headed to his room. If only they knew about the time he had walked 15 miles home with a broken ankle, or when his sister had sewn up her own cut with a sewing needle and thread during a camping trip. Tomorrow's practical training exercise would certainly be interesting. The geology laboratory was one of the largest sections on the research station, filled with equipment designed to analyze mineral samples from dozens of different worlds. James stood with his alien classmates around a massive crystalline extraction device that looked like something between a high-tech drill and a giant microscope. The machine hummed quietly as it prepared to demonstrate how medical teams could quickly analyze unknown substances they might encounter in emergency situations. Today we will observe the mineral composition analysis of samples from the Kepler 442 system, announced Dr. Vex, their Zelkari instructor whose crystalline body reflected the laboratory lights in dazzling patterns. This knowledge is essential for treating patients who may have been exposed to unknown chemical compounds during planetary exploration missions. James watched with fascination as the extraction device began working on a chunk of purple crystal about the size of a basketball. High-pressure cutters started carving precise samples while containment fields held everything in place. The alien students stood at what they considered safe distances, but James had moved closer to get a better view of the process. Crystal, the Zelkari student, vibrated with what James had learned to recognize as anxiety. Human James, perhaps you should maintain greater distance from the extraction apparatus. The safety protocols recommend a minimum of 5 meters for all biological entities. I'm fine here, James replied, standing about 3 meters away. I can see the process much better from this angle. This is really amazing technology. Buzz clicked his mandibles nervously. Your species may not understand the potential dangers of high-pressure mineral extraction. Even minor equipment malfunctions can result in projectile debris traveling at enormous velocities. James was about to respond when the extraction device made a sound that definitely was not part of its normal operation. A deep grinding noise came from somewhere inside the machine, followed by a sharp cracking sound. The containment field flickered once, twice, then disappeared completely. Emergency shutdown initiated, the station's computer announced in its calm voice, but it was already too late. The purple crystal, stressed beyond its breaking point by the extraction process, exploded like a fragmentation grenade. Sharp crystalline fragments flew in every direction at tremendous speed, filling the air with deadly purple projectiles. The alien students reacted with the speed of beings who had evolved on dangerous worlds. Crystal immediately shifted into their diamond-hard defensive form, becoming a statue of unbreakable silicon. Buzz and the other Vixen students deployed their natural chitinous shields, their arms transforming into protective barriers that could stop small meteors. Glow and the other Lumine students phased partially out of physical reality, allowing the fragments to pass harmlessly through their energy forms. James, caught in the middle of the debris field with no natural defenses, felt several sharp impacts as crystal fragments tore through his laboratory coat and found his skin. A piece about the size of a kitchen knife blade sliced across his left forearm, opening a gash that immediately began bleeding heavily. Smaller fragments had cut his hands, neck, and face, leaving a pattern of red lines across his exposed skin. The laboratory fell completely silent except for the hum of air recyclers and the soft dripping sound of James's blood hitting the floor. Emergency alarms began wailing throughout the station as sensors detected the accident and automatically summoned medical teams. James looked down at his bleeding arm with mild annoyance. Well, that's going to need some attention, he said to himself, pressing his right hand against the wound to slow the bleeding. The cut was about 4 inches long and deep enough that he could see the white of his muscle tissue underneath. The alien students remained frozen in their defensive positions, staring at James in absolute horror. To their eyes, the amount of blood visible meant that James was experiencing catastrophic trauma that would likely prove fatal within minutes. Their medical databases had no reference for any intelligent species surviving such obvious circulatory system damage. Medical emergency teams responding to Geology Laboratory 7 announced the station computer. Estimated arrival time, 3 minutes. Crystals slowly shifted back to their normal form, their harmonic voice shaking with distress. Human James, you must remain completely motionless. Any movement will accelerate the loss of your life essence. Emergency medical intervention is approaching. Buzz had begun making a rhythmic clicking sound that James realized must be some kind of prayer or death ritual. The Vixom student's forearms moved in complex patterns while his mandibles produced what sounded like a funeral chant. Glow pulsed with deep red light, their energy form flickering erratically. This is a catastrophic system failure. The human circulatory network has been compromised at multiple points. Probability of survival approaches 0. James looked around at his panicking classmates with confusion. Guys, I'm okay. It's just some cuts. I need to stop this bleeding, but I'm not dying or anything. He started walking toward the emergency medical kit mounted on the laboratory wall, leaving a small trail of blood drops behind him. The alien students watched in stunned amazement as James moved normally despite what they perceived as mortal wounds. In their experience, any creature losing that much vital fluid should have collapsed immediately. The fact that James was not only conscious but also walking and speaking coherently defied everything they understood about biology and medicine. You are mobile? Crystal asked in disbelief. Of course I'm mobile, James replied, reaching the medical kit and opening it with his uninjured hand. These are just flesh wounds. Painful and messy, but nothing that won't heal up fine with proper treatment. The emergency medical team was going to arrive soon, and James wanted to have his bleeding under control before they showed up. He had no idea that his calm response to injury was about to completely revolutionize how the galaxy viewed human resilience. James pulled open the emergency medical kit and began sorting through its contents with practiced efficiency. His left arm continued bleeding steadily, but he had managed to slow the flow by maintaining pressure with his other hand. The smaller cuts on his face and neck had already begun to clot naturally, leaving thin red lines that looked worse than they actually were. Could someone just hand me a bandage from this kit? James asked, looking over at his alien classmates who remained frozen in various defensive positions. I need to get this bleeding stopped before it makes a mess of everything. The request seemed to break the aliens out of their shock-induced paralysis. Crystal vibrated with increasing frequency, their crystalline form throwing panicked light patterns across the laboratory walls. You cannot move. Your life essence continues to escape your damaged circulation system. Movement will only accelerate the process. James paused in his examination of the medical supplies, genuinely puzzled by their extreme reaction. Life essence? You mean blood? Yeah, I'm bleeding, but it's not that serious. I've had paper cuts that bled more than some of these smaller wounds. Buzz's mandibles clicked in rapid, agitated patterns as he approached cautiously, as if James might collapse at any moment. Paper cuts? You speak of voluntarily damaging your protective covering for recreational purposes. No, James laughed, pulling out an antiseptic wipe and tearing open the package with his teeth. Paper cuts happen by accident when you're handling documents. They're tiny little cuts that barely bleed at all. This, he gestured to his wounded arm, is actually a pretty decent cut, but nothing that won't heal up just fine. Glow pulsed with increasingly erratic orange and red patterns, their energy form flickering like a candle in the wind. Minor? Your circulatory fluid has contaminated approximately 2 square meters of laboratory flooring. Our medical databases indicate that such fluid loss represents critical system failure. James began cleaning the larger wound on his arm, wincing slightly as the antiseptic stung. Look, I appreciate everyone's concern, I really do. But humans deal with injuries like this all the time. I probably got worse cuts than these just last month when I was fixing my neighbor's fence and slipped with a saw. The alien students exchanged glances that clearly communicated their complete bewilderment. Click, one of the other Vixom students, approached with obvious terror. You regularly sustain such trauma during routine activities. Well, accidents happen, James replied, applying antiseptic to the smaller cuts on his hands. Humans work with tools, play sports, explore dangerous places. Getting banged up is just part of life. My sister once fell off her bicycle and scraped up her entire left side on the pavement. She walked home, cleaned up the cuts herself, and was back on the bike the next day. Crystal's harmonic voice reached pitches that the translation system seemed to struggle with. Your offspring deliberately exposed themselves to high-velocity collisions with planetary surfaces. James realized that his casual stories about normal human activities were only making the situation more incomprehensible to his alien classmates. Okay, let me explain this differently. Human bodies are designed to handle damage and repair themselves. When we get cut, our blood forms clots to stop the bleeding. Our immune systems fight off infection. Our tissues grow back stronger than before. He demonstrated by showing them how the smaller cuts had already stopped bleeding on their own. See? These are already starting to heal. In a few days, you won't even be able to tell they were there. Buzz's funeral chanting had stopped, replaced by rapid clicking that James was learning indicated intense curiosity rather than distress. Your species possesses autonomous repair capabilities. All humans do, James confirmed, carefully bandaging his arm wound. We heal from broken bones, cuts, burns, diseases. Obviously, there are limits, but we're pretty tough overall. The emergency medical team chose that moment to burst through the laboratory doors, expecting to find a critical patient requiring immediate life support. Instead, they discovered James sitting calmly on a laboratory stool, properly bandaging his wounds while discussing human physiology with a group of fascinated alien students. Medical emergency status? Asked the team leader, a Zelkari medic whose crystalline form was specialized for healing frequencies. False alarm, James called out with a friendly wave. Just some cuts from the equipment malfunction. Nothing that won't heal up fine with basic first aid. The medical team's confusion was evident even across species barriers. They had rushed here expecting to perform emergency surgery on a dying patient, not to find someone treating their own wounds while giving an impromptu lecture on human biology. Dr. Vex, the Zelkari instructor, resonated with sounds of amazement. The human student has demonstrated remarkable stability despite significant tissue damage. This contradicts all our previous understanding of human physiological limitations. James finished securing the bandage on his arm and flexed his fingers to make sure he hadn't wrapped it too tightly. Honestly, this isn't even close to the worst injury I've ever had. When I was 12, I broke my wrist falling out of a tree. Had to wear a cast for 6 weeks, but it healed perfectly. You can't even tell it was ever broken. The alien students stared at him as if he had just claimed to have died and come back to life. In their understanding of biology, breaking structural support elements was typically a permanent, crippling injury. The idea that humans could not only survive such trauma but heal completely was revolutionary. Glow pulsed with what James was beginning to recognize as excitement rather than distress. Your species routinely recovers from structural damage with no permanent impairment. That's the idea, James confirmed. Humans are pretty good at bouncing back from things that try to knock us down. The emergency medical team stood around James looking completely bewildered. Their scanning equipment had detected the accident and registered what their computers classified as severe trauma, yet here was their patient sitting calmly and discussing his weekend plans with alien students who stared at him like he was performing miracles. Patient status appears stable despite initial damage assessments, reported the Zelkari medic, whose crystalline form was pulsing with confused harmonics. All vital signs are within acceptable parameters for human physiology. James rolled up his sleeves to show the medical team that his bandaging job was adequate. As he did, several old scars became visible on his arms and hands. The alien students immediately focused on these marks with intense fascination, as if they were looking at ancient battle wounds on a legendary warrior. Crystal moved closer, their facete surface reflecting the overhead lights as they examined the pale lines and marks scattered across James's skin. Human James, these appear to be indicators of previous tissue damage. How many times has your structural integrity been compromised? James looked down at his arms and laughed. Oh, these old things? Let me see. He pointed to a thin white line near his wrist. This one happened when I was 8 years old. I was helping my dad build a treehouse and grabbed a piece of wood with a nail sticking out of it. Went right through my hand. The alien students made sounds of horror that transcended species barriers. Buzz's mandibles clicked frantically while Glow's energy form flickered between deep red and purple. You survived a puncture wound that penetrated completely through your manipulator appendage. Buzz asked, his voice climbing to higher pitches. At such a young developmental stage. Sure, James replied casually. My mom cleaned it out, we went to the hospital for a tetanus shot, and it healed up fine. Didn't even slow me down much. I was back to helping with the treehouse the next day. He pointed to another scar, this one shaped like a crescent on his forearm. This beauty came from a camping trip when I was 15. Was cutting firewood with a hatchet and it slipped. Cut myself pretty deep, but we were miles from any hospital. Crystal's harmonic voice reached frequencies that made the translation system struggle. You were stranded in wilderness conditions with severe lacerations. My older brother Tom stitched it up with fishing line, James continued, seemingly oblivious to the growing amazement of his audience. Wasn't pretty, but it worked. The scar's a bit messy because fishing line isn't really designed for medical use, but the wound healed completely. The emergency medical team exchanged glances that clearly communicated their disbelief. In their medical databases, wilderness injuries without proper treatment were typically fatal or led to permanent disability. Dr. Vex approached with obvious scientific curiosity overriding their earlier concern. Your family unit performed surgical procedures without medical training or proper equipment. Emergency field medicine, James explained. When you can't get to a hospital, you do what you have to do. Humans have been patching each other up for thousands of years. We're pretty good at improvising. He showed them a burn scar on his thumb. This happened last year when I grabbed a hot pan without thinking. Second-degree burn, hurt like crazy for a few days, but skin grew back good as new. Click approached cautiously, her forearms moving in what James had learned were gestures of amazement. Your damaged tissue regenerated completely? With full functionality restored. That's how human healing works, James confirmed. We're designed to recover from damage. Burns, cuts, broken bones, infections, our bodies fight back and repair themselves. Glow pulsed with bright yellow light, their excitement barely contained within their energy form. What is the extent of damage your species can recover from? James thought for a moment. Well, there are limits, obviously. But humans have survived some pretty incredible things. People have been struck by lightning and lived. Others have survived falls from airplanes. My grandfather was shot 3 times during a war and lived to be 92 years old. The alien students fell into stunned silence. In their understanding of biology, the injuries James described so casually would be instantly fatal to most known species. Your grandfather sustained multiple projectile wounds and continued functioning for decades afterward. Crystal asked, their voice barely audible through the translation system. He always said those bullet holes just gave him character, James replied with a smile. He used to joke that he was too stubborn to die. I think that pretty much describes humans in general. We're too stubborn to let injuries stop us. The medical team began packing up their equipment, realizing that their services were not needed. As they prepared to leave, the Zelkari medic approached James with obvious respect. Human James, we must revise our species databases immediately. Your physiological resilience parameters appear to be grossly underestimated in our current medical references. We just keep going, James said simply. Humans don't give up easy. We get hurt, we heal up, we learn from it, and we move forward. It's just part of being human. As the medical team left, the alien students remained gathered around James, asking endless questions about human recovery abilities. They wanted to know about everything from how long broken bones took to heal to whether humans could survive diseases that would devastate other species. James found himself becoming an impromptu teacher, explaining concepts that seemed basic to him but revolutionary to beings from worlds where minor injuries could mean death. He had no idea that his casual attitude toward pain and damage was about to change how the entire galaxy viewed humanity. The simple act of treating his wounds like minor inconveniences had revealed something profound about human nature. They were far more resilient than anyone had imagined. Within hours of the laboratory incident, word had spread throughout the entire research station about the human who had treated serious injuries like minor scratches. James found himself something of a celebrity as alien students from other programs began stopping by the medical wing to catch a glimpse of the supposedly indestructible human. The next morning, James arrived at his regular medical training class to find the room packed with visitors. Zelkari students from the engineering program stood alongside Vixum historians and Lumine physicists, all eager to observe the human who had challenged everything they thought they knew about biological limitations. I hope you do not mind the additional audience, Dr. Vex explained, their crystalline form reflecting nervous patterns of light. Word of yesterday's demonstration has generated considerable scientific interest across multiple disciplines. James looked around at the crowd of alien faces, mandibles, and energy forms all focused intently on him. I didn't really demonstrate anything special. I just cleaned up some cuts and put on bandages. Crystal approached with what James now recognized as excitement rather than concern. Human James, I have been researching your species' medical history through the Galactic database. The information I discovered is quite remarkable. Oh? James settled into his usual seat, noting that the aliens were maintaining a respectful distance as if he might spontaneously perform another feat of impossible survival. According to historical records, humans regularly engage in activities that would be classified as extreme survival scenarios by most civilizations. Your species climbs vertical rock formations for recreation, deliberately enters combat with dangerous predators for sport, and voluntarily subjects itself to extreme environmental conditions. Buzz clicked his mandibles in rapid patterns that James had learned indicated amazement. We also discovered records of something called extreme sports. Humans apparently launched themselves from aircraft at high altitudes and free fall toward planetary surfaces for entertainment. You mean skydiving? James asked. Yeah, that's pretty fun. I've done it a few times. The rush is incredible when you jump out of that plane. The alien audience made collective sounds of disbelief. Glow pulsed with rapid color changes that their translation system rendered as stuttering speech. You voluntarily exit aircraft, in flight, for pleasure. The parachute opens before you hit the ground, James explained with a laugh. It's actually pretty safe when done properly. Much safer than driving to work every day. A new Zelkari student that James hadn't met before resonated with curious harmonics. Your transportation methods also involve significant risk factors. Everything involves some risk, James replied. Humans just accept that and keep living our lives. We wear seatbelts, follow safety rules, and try to be careful, but we don't let the possibility of getting hurt stop us from doing things. Dr. Vex began the day's lesson, but it quickly turned into an impromptu seminar on human physiology and psychology. The alien students wanted to understand how humans could function normally with their apparent vulnerability to injury. Yesterday you mentioned field medicine, Click said, her forearms moving in questioning gestures. Can you explain how untrained humans perform medical procedures on themselves and others? James thought about the best way to explain something that seemed obvious to him. Humans learn basic first aid as part of growing up. We know how to stop bleeding, treat burns, set broken bones, and handle emergencies until proper medical help arrives. He pulled out his personal communication device and showed them images from Earth's internet. See, these are pictures of human emergency responders. We have people whose entire job is running toward danger to help others. Firefighters go into burning buildings. Paramedics treat injured people in dangerous situations. Search and rescue teams climb mountains and explore caves to find lost people. The alien students stared at the images with obvious amazement. To them, the idea of deliberately entering hazardous situations was nearly incomprehensible. Your species sends individuals into active fire zones, a Lumine student asked, their energy form flickering with what appeared to be admiration. Every single day, James confirmed. Humans help each other. When someone's in trouble, we don't calculate the risks and decide it's too dangerous. We just help. Crystal vibrated with harmonics that conveyed deep respect. I am beginning to understand why your species was selected for this program despite your apparent physical limitations. You possess psychological resilience that compensates for biological vulnerabilities. We're not really that fragile, James protested. We just heal differently than you do. Your species can turn diamond hard to avoid damage. Ours gets damaged and then repairs itself. Both strategies work. The discussion continued throughout the morning as alien students shared their own species' approaches to injury and survival. The Vixen molted their damaged exoskeletons and grew new ones. The Lumens could reorganize their energy matrices to bypass damaged areas. Each species had evolved different solutions to the same basic problem of surviving in a dangerous universe. What I find most remarkable, Dr. Vex concluded, is that humans have developed cultural and psychological adaptations rather than purely biological ones. Your species chooses to face danger rather than simply avoiding it. As the class ended and the visiting students began to leave, several approached James individually to express their newfound respect for human capabilities. What had started as concern for a supposedly fragile species had transformed into genuine admiration for human determination and resilience. Crystal approached as James was packing up his materials. I am compiling a comprehensive report on human medical capabilities for the Galactic Medical Council. Would you be willing to review my findings? Sure, James agreed. Just remember that I'm pretty average for a human. We're all like this. That evening, as James video called his family back on Earth, he smiled as he told them about his alien classmates' amazement at basic human toughness. Tomorrow would bring new lessons and probably more surprised reactions when his fellow students learned about humanity's approach to extreme sports and dangerous occupations.